In the spring of 1912, when the Mississippi River fell back after one of the worst floods in memory, a farmer near Helena, Arkansas, photographed a paved stone road lying 20 feet beneath the river mud. The proof is a cracked glass plate labeled River Road, April 29, 1912. But if the road was real, who built it under the Mississippi? And why did the Army bury it again before the newspapers could print the second photograph? That is the question the file never answers. Not directly, not in the reports, not in the newspaper clippings, not in the letters sent between county officials, railway men, and the engineering office that arrived 3 days later with canvas tents, armed guards, and orders no one in town was allowed to read. The official explanation was simple. The flood had exposed an old ferry landing. Nothing more. A forgotten stone causeway. A local road from the French period, maybe. Something built by settlers, then swallowed by the river. That explanation sounds reasonable until you look at the photograph. The road in the glass plate is not a ferry landing. It does not slope toward the river. It does not end at the bank. It runs straight beneath it. 2 parallel lanes of fitted stone, bordered by curb-like edges, disappearing under layers of mud in both directions. The stones are too large for a farm road, too regular for a natural formation, and too deeply buried to belong to any settlement on record. And there is something else. At the center of the road, running between the lanes, is a narrow, dark groove, like a channel or a railbed, or something designed to carry weight in a straight line. The photograph was taken by a farmer named Caleb Rusk. He lived 4 miles south of Helena on land that had been underwater for nearly 3 weeks during the flood. When the river dropped, it left behind dead livestock, broken fences, snapped trees, and fields covered in gray silt. But near the old Cottonwood Bend, the mud had peeled away in a wide cut, exposing stone. Caleb first thought it was the foundation of a washed-out building. Then he noticed the stones continued in a line. A road, not a trail, not a wagon path, a road. He sent for his brother-in-law, Matthew Greer, who owned a glass plate camera and ran a small portrait studio in town. Greer arrived on April 29, 1912, and took at least 2 photographs. Only one survives. The first photograph shows Caleb Rusk standing beside the exposed stone road, holding a measuring stick. Behind him, the riverbank rises like a wall. The road lies below him, half buried in mud, dark with water. A horse and wagon stand in the distance for scale. On the back of the plate sleeve, someone wrote, "Road under riverbed, south of Helena. Measured width, 18 feet 7 in." The second photograph is missing. But we know it existed because 3 people mentioned it. Greer's daughter said he took a closer picture of the middle groove. A county deputy wrote that the second view showed marks on the stones, and an Army inventory later listed. Photographic plate, close view, central trackway, removed to district office. Removed. Not lost, not broken. Removed. The story might have stayed local if not for the school teacher. Her name was Eliza March. She taught at a 1-room schoolhouse north of the Rusk property and kept a daily journal. Most of her entries are ordinary. Weather, lessons, children absent, church suppers, sickness, flood damage. But on April 30th, she wrote, "Mr. Rusk showed us the stone road today. It lies beneath the mud where the river stood last week. The children walked on it, though I told them not to. It feels older than a road ought to feel. The stones are set so tightly that no grass grows between them." The next day, men from town came to look. Some said Spanish, some said Indian. Mr. Greer said no Indian road was laid so straight. I do not know what to think. Then, on May 2nd, soldiers came before noon. Not militia, regular men. They put rope around the place and told us to leave. One officer asked who had taken photographs. Mr. Greer lied poorly. That is the first mention of the Army. Official records say the Army Corps of Engineers sent a survey party to assess levee damage after the flood. That part is true. The Corps had reason to be there. The Mississippi floods were a national concern, and engineers inspected riverbanks, levees, channels, and washouts. But the men who came to Rusk's Field did not behave like a normal flood survey team. They did not inspect the levee first. They went directly to the exposed road. According to a letter written by County Clerk Samuel P. Alden, the men arrived with a sealed order from the district office in Memphis. They asked for the photographer, the landowner, and any newspaper men who had seen the site. Then they placed guards along the bank. Alden wrote, "Captain Weller informed me that the exposure constituted a navigational hazard and was not to be disturbed by civilians. I asked how a buried road beneath a drained field could endanger navigation. He replied that the river would return soon enough." The captain's name was Thomas Weller. He appears in other Corps records as an engineer attached to river works. He was not a mysterious man, not a secret agent, not a figure from rumor. He supervised levee repairs, dredging inspections, and flood control surveys. But in the Rusk file, his language becomes careful, too careful. His official report, dated May 4th, 1912, says, "Subsurface masonry exposed by scour action. Probable remnant of early landing or failed revetment. Recommend immediate backfill to prevent public interference and further destabilization of bank." Subsurface masonry, not road, not structure, not archaeological site. Masonry, a word broad enough to hide anything. The backfill began the next morning. Men shoveled silt back over the stones. Mules dragged timber mats across the exposed section. By afternoon, a dredge had been brought closer to the bend, and wet mud was pumped over the area until the road vanished beneath a smooth, gray surface. Caleb Rusk protested. So did several townsmen. The local newspaper, the Helena Evening Star, planned to run the story on May 6th. The headline had already been set: "Ancient Road Found Under Mississippi Mud." But that issue was never printed. The editor later claimed the press broke. The replacement issue, printed 2 days later, contained only a small notice. Engineers examined flood damage south of town. No mention of the road. No mention of photographs. No mention of soldiers. The original headline proof survived because a typesetter named Louis Bell kept it folded inside a Bible. His grandson donated it to a regional archive in 1968. That proof is one of the strongest pieces of the file, because it shows the newspaper was preparing to report something before someone stopped it. Why? The official answer is safety. The site was unstable. The river was dangerous. Crowds might interfere with flood repairs. Those reasons make sense, until you read the private notes. Captain Weller kept a field notebook. Most of it remains missing. But 3 torn pages were found inside a box of Corps correspondence, misfiled under levee contracts from 1914. On the first page, he drew the exposed road. His drawing matches the surviving photograph. 2 stone lanes, raised edges, a central groove. He labeled the width 18 feet 7 in. He labeled the visible length 143 feet exposed. Continues beneath silt both ends. At the bottom, he wrote, "Orientation, not aligned to present river, road, property, or levee. Runs 11 degrees off true north." That detail matters. A ferry road would align with the water. A farm road would align with property. A town road would align with streets. This road aligned with nothing known in 1912. The second page is stranger. Weller listed the stone type as dark limestone, not local to immediate bank. He noted that several blocks showed vitrified surfaces, as if exposed to intense heat. He also wrote, "Tooling uniform, joint fit exceptional. No mortar visible, stone seated by weight." Then, central groove depth varies between 4 and 7 inches. Interior smooth, Polished, not wheel rut, not wheel rut. That eliminates the easiest explanation. Wagon wheels can wear grooves into stone, but they do not usually create a single central channel between two paved lanes, especially not one smooth enough to look polished. The third page contains the line that turned the file from a curiosity into something else. Beneath mud at western edge. Found second course descending below road surface. Possible lower level. Do not expose without authority. A lower level, not a road alone. A structure beneath the road. Weller sent a telegram to Memphis that same night. The text does not survive, but the reply does. It reads, "Limit exposure. Secure photographic material. Prevent publication until reviewed. Backfill at earliest practical moment. Do not permit local excavation. No signature, only initials, ARM." No one has identified who ARM was. The Army covered the road on May 5th. But the flood had not finished revealing things. For several days after the backfill, water continued draining from the low fields around the bend. On May 8th, 2 boys hunting frogs found another section of stone half a mile inland from the first site. This second exposure was smaller, only 12 feet, but it had the same fitted blocks, the same central groove, the same strange alignment. Eliza March recorded it in her journal. The boys found more road near the willow ditch. Mr. Rusk says it points toward the first. Captain Weller was told and became angry. Soldiers filled it before supper. That means the road was not an isolated piece. It continued, possibly for hundreds of yards, maybe miles, and it ran beneath land that, according to every available map, had been river bottom or floodplain for generations. Then came the third discovery. A railway surveyor named Henry Clay Voss was mapping flood damage to a spur line when he noticed a line of low stone rises beneath the mud, nearly hidden by reeds. He wrote to his supervisor, "There appears to be a buried paved course running across the section, not corresponding to any road in county memory. If extended, it would pass beneath the river channel and continue east." His supervisor replied, "Do not include antiquarian observations in rail damage report." Antiquarian observations, another phrase that hides more than it says. Voss ignored the instruction and made his own sketch. That sketch shows the road crossing beneath the Mississippi, not along it. If his measurements were correct, the road did not belong to the riverbank. The river had crossed the road. At some point in the past, the Mississippi had shifted over something already there. That is not impossible. Rivers move. The Mississippi has changed course many times. It cuts new channels, abandons old ones, eats farms, creates islands, and buries whole towns under silt. But this road was not an ordinary buried town road. It was too deep, too straight, too well made, and too old for any known settlement in the area. At least, that is what the geologist thought. His name was Dr. Amos Teague, from a small college in Tennessee. He came after hearing rumors from a former student who lived near Helena. He arrived too late to see the first exposure, but he examined 2 loose stones that Caleb Rusk had taken before the soldiers arrived. Those stones disappeared later. But Teague's letter survived. He wrote, "The specimens are not consistent with casual fieldstone paving. They appear cut, dressed, and finished for repeated load-bearing use. One face bears a glassy black sheen not attributable to river wear. I would hesitate to assign them to any recent work." Recent. That word is doing work. He did not say ancient. He did not say impossible. He said not recent. Then, in a private postscript to a colleague, if Rusk's account is honest, the road predates the present river course. If the road predates the river course, then either the river moved over it, or the road was built where no rational road should have been built. I dislike both conclusions. That is the problem. Every explanation creates another problem. If settlers built it, where are the records? If native builders made it, why does it not resemble known earthworks or trade paths in the region? If it was a military road, why is it under the river and absent from maps? If it was a ferry landing, why does it run across the floodplain instead of toward the water? If it was natural, why did engineers draw it as a road? And if it was nothing, why did the Army cover it so quickly? The cover-up did not happen all at once. It happened in layers. First, the site was roped off. Then, the photographs were collected. Then, the newspaper story vanished. Then, the exposed stones were buried. Then, letters were answered with vague language. Then, official reports renamed the road as subsurface masonry. Then, the file disappeared into flood control records. That is how things vanish in archives. Not by burning. Not always. Sometimes a road becomes masonry. A discovery becomes damage. A photograph becomes a removed plate. A witness becomes a nuisance. And a question becomes too specific to file. Caleb Rusk tried for years to get his photograph back. He wrote to the district office in Memphis in 1913. No reply. He wrote again in 1915. A clerk answered, "No photographic materials belonging to you are held by this office." That was technically possible because the surviving photograph had never been taken by the Army. Greer had hidden the first plate behind a false drawer in his studio. The second plate, the close view, was the one taken. In 1922, Caleb wrote one final letter. "You may keep the picture, but you cannot tell me I did not stand on that road. I walked it. The stones rang under my boots. Roads do not ring unless there is space beneath them. Space beneath them." That matches Weller's note about a lower level. A road over a hollow. A paved surface above something deeper. In 1931, during another period of low water, fishermen reported seeing a line of square stones near the old bend. A local man named Oscar Bell claimed he could see steps going down where no steps ought to be. The report was dismissed. The river rose. The stones vanished. In 1944, the Army returned to the area for wartime river work. A confidential engineering memo mentions, "Avoid deep cutting at Rusk Bend unless authorized. Prior masonry exposure in 1912, unresolved. Unresolved. Not explained. Not false. Unresolved." That word survived because someone forgot to remove the memo from a public box of levy files. By then, Caleb Rusk was dead. Matthew Greer was dead. Eliza March was dead. Captain Weller was dead. The people who had seen the road were becoming names on paper. And paper is easy to doubt. Then, in 1962, a graduate student named Walter Haynes began studying Mississippi course changes. He found references to the 1912 exposure and tried to locate the site. His notes show that he compared old river maps from 1815, 1844, 1869, and 1903. The river had moved, but not enough. Even using older channels, the road's alignment still did not match any known crossing, settlement, levee, ferry, military route, or plantation road. Haynes wrote, "If the Rusk Road existed as described, it belonged to a landscape no map in this office preserves." He requested access to the Army's 1912 photographic materials. The request was denied. Reason: not located, not classified, not restricted, not destroyed, not located. Haynes visited the site in October 1963. The old bend had changed again. The river was farther east. Cotton fields covered part of the area. A line of trees marked a drainage ditch. He found nothing on the surface, but he interviewed Caleb Rusk's daughter, Miriam, then 72 years old. She remembered the road. She had been a child when the flood receded. Her statement was recorded on tape. The tape is poor quality, but one part is clear. It was not like stones thrown down. It was like a street. My father said there were marks in the middle, like something had run there for a long time. The soldiers did not want us looking. One of them told my mother, "This was not meant to be seen. This was not meant to be seen." No soldier's name. No way to verify it. But the phrase fits the pattern. In 1987, the surviving glass plate was rediscovered when Greer's old studio building was sold. It was inside a sealed wooden box with 2 broken portrait plates and a packet of negatives. The image was damaged but usable. When enlarged, details became visible that earlier viewers may have missed. The measuring stick, the fitted stones, the raised edge, the central groove, and on one stone near Caleb's foot, a faint marking, not letters, not numbers, a symbol. 3 lines meeting inside a circle. That may be what the missing second photograph showed more clearly. The marks on the stones, mentioned by the deputy, the reason the Army took the close view. The symbol has never been matched to any known road builder, railway company, military survey, plantation mark, or local stonemason stamp. Some researchers say it is just a crack. Others say it is a tool mark. But when the image is rotated, the symbol appears on 2 other stones, partly buried in mud. That means it was repeated. Repeated marks are not accidents. The Rusk Road, as it came to be called, has never been excavated. The land changed hands many times. Flood control work altered the area. Modern river maps place part of the original exposure under a reinforced bank and part beneath private land. Ground-penetrating surveys were proposed twice, once in 1994, again in 2008. Both projects ended before fieldwork began. Funding issues, according to one file. Land access problems, according to another. But a note from a county official in 2008 says, "Federal consultation required due to Historic Corps activity at location." Historic Corps activity. The Army covered the road in 1912. Nearly a century later, that fact still complicated access. Why? If it was only a ferry landing, why did it matter? If it was only flood debris, why did federal consultation matter? If there was nothing there, why not let someone prove it? There is one last document. It is not official. It is a letter written by Captain Weller to his wife, dated May 9, 1912. The letter was never sent. It was found among his personal effects after his death. Most of it is ordinary. He writes about heat, mosquitoes, exhaustion, and the misery of flooded country. Then, near the end, he says, "We have covered the road. I am glad of it, though I expect I will dream of it." The men joked at first, saying the Romans had come to Arkansas. They stopped joking when we opened the western edge and heard the hollow under the stones. Then there was air coming out, cold air, from beneath a road under river mud. I cannot make that fit any honest account. And finally, orders are orders, but I wish we had not seen the marks. Roads are made to lead somewhere. This one led under the river, and I fear it was not meant for us. That is where the file ends, not with an answer, not with a full excavation, not with a public report. Just one photograph, one missing plate, a buried road, a newspaper headline that never ran, and an Army captain who admitted in private that the official explanation did not fit. Maybe the Rusk Road was ordinary. Maybe it was a colonial landing, misremembered and overdescribed. Maybe the flood exposed old revetment stones and frightened people turned them into a mystery. Maybe the Army buried it because crowds were dangerous and the riverbank unstable. Maybe every strange phrase in the file has a practical meaning. Subsurface masonry, navigational hazard, prevent publication, secure photographic material, backfill immediately. Maybe all of it was routine. But routine things do not usually leave behind this many silences. A missing photograph, a stopped newspaper story, a second exposure buried before sunset, a surveyor told not to include what he saw, a geologist whose stones vanished, a captain who wrote one thing officially and another thing privately, and a road that, according to the only surviving image, ran straight beneath the Mississippi as if the river was the thing that came later. So the question remains, who built a stone road under the Mississippi? Where did it lead? And why, when the flood finally exposed it, did the Army cover it again? The river has changed since 1912. It has shifted, narrowed, deepened, and been forced into banks stronger than anything Caleb Rusk knew. The Cottonwood Bend is gone. The fields are different. The old drainage ditch is overgrown. But somewhere under silt, clay, stone, and federal concrete, the road may still be there. Silent, level, waiting beneath the river. And perhaps that is why it was covered. Not because it was dangerous to boats, not because it threatened the levee, but because roads are invitations. They ask to be followed. And this one went somewhere no map was willing to show.